God's timing is perfect. That's a phrase we hear often, but when we're in the middle of waiting, struggling, or feeling stuck, it's hard to truly believe it. Life has a way of making us feel like we are running out of time, like we're too late, or like we've missed our opportunity. But let me remind you today, God is never early, never late, but always on time. Think about it. How many times have you prayed for something only to feel like God was silent? How many times have you looked at your situation and wondered, God, do you even see me? Do you hear my prayers? Why is it taking so long? But what if I told you that the delay is not a denial? What if I told you that what seems like a setback is actually a divine setup? God operates outside of our human understanding of time while we are looking at the clock, stressing over deadlines and worrying about what's next. God is already in the future, aligning everything perfectly. His plans are not bound by human schedules. The job you've been praying for, the breakthrough you've been waiting on, the healing you've been seeking, it's not that God hasn't answered, it's that He's making sure everything is in place, so that when He moves, it is unstoppable. The Bible is full of stories where God's timing seemed off to people, but in hindsight, it was absolutely perfect. Take Abraham and Sarah, for example. They were promised a child, yet years went by and nothing happened. They got impatient. They tried to take matters into their own hands. But God had already set a time for Isaac to be born. He was not late, he was not early, he was right on time. And when Isaac finally arrived, it was undeniable that it was God's doing, not human effort. Look at Joseph. He had a dream of greatness as a young boy, but instead of stepping into his destiny immediately, he went through betrayal, slavery, and imprisonment. From the outside, it looked like Joseph's life was off track. It looked like things were falling apart, but in reality, God was preparing him for the exact moment he needed to step into leadership. If Joseph had become a ruler too soon, he would not have been ready. If he had become a ruler too late, Egypt would have suffered. But God knew the exact moment to bring him from the prison to the palace. And when that moment came, it happened suddenly. The same applies to your life. Right now, you may feel like you are stuck in the waiting season. You may feel like you've been praying and praying, but nothing is changing. But let me encourage you, God is not ignoring you. He is preparing something greater than you can imagine. Just because you don't see movement doesn't mean nothing is happening. Think about how a seed grows. When you plant a seed, you don't see anything happening for days, maybe even weeks. But underground, something powerful is taking place. The roots are growing. The foundation is being built. And when the time is right, that seed will break through the soil and grow into something strong. Your life is the same way. God is working beneath the surface. He is growing something in you, strengthening your faith, shaping your character, and preparing you for what's ahead. The problem is that we often want things now. We live in a world of instant gratification. We want quick answers, immediate results, and fast breakthroughs. But God doesn't work like that. God is more interested in making you ready for the blessing than giving you the blessing before you're ready. Because if you receive something too soon, you might not be able to handle it. If you step into something before the right time, it may not last. Let me give you a real-world example. Imagine a young person dreaming of being a CEO of a major company. They have the vision, the passion, and the ambition. But if they are given that position without the right experience, wisdom, and leadership skills, they will struggle, they might even fail. But if they go through the process, learning, growing, facing challenges, and gaining wisdom, then when the opportunity comes, they will be fully prepared to walk in it. That's exactly what God is doing in your life. You may not understand the delay, but trust that there is purpose in the waiting. God is not punishing you, He is preparing you. He is aligning the right people, opening the right doors, and setting things in motion that you cannot see yet. And here's the most powerful part. When God's time arrives, things shift instantly. You may feel like you've been waiting forever, but when God moves, it happens suddenly. One moment, Joseph was in a prison cell. The next, he was standing before Pharaoh as the second most powerful man in Egypt. One moment, the Israelites were in slavery. The next, they were walking out of Egypt with freedom and favor. One moment, Peter was fishing with no success. The next, Jesus told him to cast his net, and he pulled in more fish than he could handle. God doesn't move according to our schedule. He moves according to His divine plan. And when He moves, nothing can stop it. So if you've been waiting, if you've been wondering when your breakthrough is coming, don't give up. Don't lose faith, because God's perfect timing is about to shift everything in your life. Every struggle has a purpose. That's a hard truth to accept when you're in the middle of pain, heartbreak, or uncertainty. When life feels like it's crumbling around you, it's easy to ask, why is this happening to me? Where is God in all of this? But what if I told you that the very thing you're struggling with right now is the key to your breakthrough? What if I told you that your pain is not pointless, your tears are not wasted, and your battles are not in vain? God never allows a struggle without a purpose. Nothing in your life happens by accident. Every trial, every disappointment, every delay, it's all part of a greater plan that you may not understand yet. When you go through difficult seasons, it doesn't mean that God has abandoned you. In fact, it often means that He is preparing you for something greater. Your struggle is shaping you, refining you, and getting you ready for the shift that is coming. Think about it. Gold must go through fire before it is purified. Diamonds are formed under intense pressure. Strong muscles are built through resistance. Growth always comes with struggle. And the same is true in your spiritual life. The battles you're facing today are strengthening you for what's ahead. Look at the story of David. Before he became king, he had to fight lions and bears while taking care of his father's sheep. Those battles prepared him for the day he would stand before Goliath. Imagine if David had never faced those struggles. Imagine if he had lived an easy, comfortable life without any challenges. He wouldn't have had the courage, the faith, or the strength to step up when it mattered most. But because he endured hardship, he was ready when his moment came. The same applies to you. You may not understand why you're facing what you're facing, but trust that God is using it to prepare you. The enemy wants you to believe that your struggles are pointless. He wants you to get discouraged, to give up, to think that God has forgotten you. But let me tell you something. The very thing the enemy is using to break you. Think about Joseph. He had dreams of greatness, but instead of stepping into that destiny immediately, he was betrayed by his brothers, sold into slavery, falsely accused and thrown into prison. If anyone had a reason to feel abandoned by God, it was Joseph. But what Joseph didn't realize at the time was that every single struggle he went through was positioning him for the palace. If he had never been betrayed, he would have never ended up in Egypt. If he had never been falsely accused, he would have never met the Pharaoh's cupbearer. And if he had never been in prison, he would have never been called to interpret Pharaoh's dream and step into his destiny. What if your struggle is positioning you for something greater? What if what looks like a setback is actually a setup for your next season? What if the things you're crying about today will be the very testimony that inspires someone else tomorrow? One of the greatest mistakes we make is trying to run from the struggle instead of asking God what He is trying to teach us through it. When we face hard times, our natural reaction is to pray, God, take this away. But sometimes, instead of taking it away, God is asking us to trust Him through it. Because the truth is, if you skip the struggle, you might also skip the blessing. If David had never faced Goliath, he might have never stepped into his calling as king. If Joseph had never gone through the hardship, he might have never become a ruler in Egypt. Your breakthrough is often hidden inside your battle. And here's the most powerful part. Your struggles don't just shape you, they also qualify you. Many times God allows us to go through pain so that we can help others who are going through the same thing. How can you truly encourage someone if you've never experienced what they're going through? How can you tell someone to trust God in their storm if you've never had to trust Him in your own? Some of the greatest ministries, the most powerful testimonies, and the strongest leaders have been birthed from seasons of struggle. Think about Jesus Himself. He was mocked, rejected, beaten, and crucified. The Son of God, the Savior of the world, had to endure the ultimate struggle before He could step into the glory of resurrection. If even Jesus had to go through suffering before stepping into His victory, why do we think our journey should be any different? So today, I want to encourage you, don't despise your struggle. Don't let the enemy convince you that your pain is meaningless. God is using it. He is preparing you, strengthening you, and equipping you for something bigger than you can imagine. You may not see it now, but one day you will look back and realize that every battle, every disappointment, and every tear was leading you to something greater. And when that shift happens, you will understand that the struggle was never meant to break you. It was meant to build you. Faith unlocks the shift. That's a truth that many of us struggle with, especially when we are standing at the edge of uncertainty. When life feels unpredictable, when the doors seem closed, when everything around us suggests that nothing is changing, it is easy to doubt. But let me tell you something. Faith is the key that unlocks what God has already prepared for you. Without faith, you can't access the shift. Without faith, you remain stuck in the same place, missing out on what God is ready to release into your life. Faith is not about seeing, it's about believing before you see. Too many people are waiting for a sign, waiting for confirmation, waiting for everything to line up perfectly before they step out. But if you could see everything in advance, it wouldn't require faith. God is calling you to trust Him even when you don't understand, even when it doesn't make sense, even when the odds are against you. Look at Peter. He was in the boat with the other disciples when he saw Jesus walking on water. At that moment, he had a choice. Stay in the boat where it was safe or step out in faith. Jesus didn't promise Peter that the water would feel solid beneath his feet. He didn't explain how it was going to work. He simply said, come. And Peter had to make a decision. Would he let fear hold him back, or would he activate his faith? The moment Peter stepped out of the boat, something miraculous happened. The water that should have swallowed him held him up. Why? Because faith is what connects us to the supernatural. Faith is what allows us to walk in the impossible. But here's the key. The miracle didn't happen while Peter was in the boat. It happened when he stepped out. That is where so many people get stuck. They are waiting for God to move, but God is waiting for them to move. Faith requires action. You can't just say, I believe, and then stay in the same place. You have to move in expectation even before you see the evidence. Faith is walking like the door is already open, even when it still looks closed. Faith is preparing for the blessing even when there's no sign of it yet. Look at the woman with the issue of blood. She had been suffering for 12 years. She had spent all her money on doctors. Nothing had changed. But when she heard that Jesus was passing by, something inside her shifted. She didn't wait for Jesus to come to her. She didn't sit back and say, if it's God's will, He will heal me. No, she got up, pushed through the crowd, and touched the hem of His garment. That touch was a touch of faith. She wasn't supposed to be in that crowd. She wasn't supposed to touch anyone, but she believed that if she could just get close enough to Jesus, she would be healed. And she was. What would have happened if she had let fear stop her? What if she had said, maybe another time, or I'll wait until Jesus notices me? She would have missed her moment. How many people today are missing their moment because they are waiting instead of acting in faith? Faith is not passive. Faith doesn't just sit back and hope something happens. Faith steps forward even when it's risky. Faith says, God, I trust you enough to move even when I don't have all the answers. Think about the Israelites when they were standing at the Jordan River about to enter the promised land. God told them to step into the water, but the river was still flowing. The waters didn't part like they did for Moses at the Red Sea. This time, God wanted them to step in first. And the moment their feet touched the water, the river stopped and dry ground appeared. What does that mean for you? Sometimes you have to take the first step before you see the breakthrough. That's the difference between waiting for a shift and unlocking the shift. Too often people think that faith means sitting back and waiting for God to do everything, but real faith requires movement. It requires you to apply for the job even when you've been rejected before. It requires you to start the business even when you don't have all the resources yet. It requires you to trust that what God has placed in your heart is real even when your circumstances don't line up with it yet. The Bible says that without faith, it is impossible to please God. Why? Because faith is the language of heaven. Faith is what connects us to the supernatural power of God. Everything that God does in your life requires faith. You don't receive breakthrough by waiting. You receive it by believing and stepping out. Maybe you've been praying for something, but you haven't seen it happen yet. Ask yourself this: are you moving in faith, or are you waiting for everything to be perfect? Because faith doesn't wait for perfect conditions. Faith moves even when it's uncertain. Faith trusts that God has already made a way even when you don't see it yet. And here's the most powerful part. When you activate faith, things begin to shift. Doors open that were once closed. Opportunities come that you never expected. Provision appears where there was once lack. But none of that happens without faith. So today I want to challenge you. What is the step of faith that God is asking you to take? What is the thing that you know deep down He has called you to do, but fear has been holding you back? Because the shift that you're waiting for is already in motion, but it requires you to step into it. God is ready to move. The question is, are you? When God shifts things in your life, nothing can stop it. No person, no circumstance, no opposition, and no force in this world can stand against what God has already set in motion. When God declares a shift, when He decides that it is time for things to change in your life, everything must align with His will. It doesn't matter how impossible it seems, how long you've been waiting, or what obstacles stand in your way. When God says it's time, it is time. One of the greatest mistakes people make is believing that their situation is bigger than God's power. They look at their circumstances and think, this is too hard, it's been too long, or I don't see a way out. But let me remind you today, there is no limit to what God can do. He is not bound by time, resources, or human expectations. He is the same God who parted the Red Sea, who made water come from a rock, who raised the dead, and who spoke the universe into existence. If He can do all that, what makes you think He can't shift your situation? Think about the story of Lazarus. He had been dead for 4 days. Everyone had given up hope. People told Jesus it was too late. But Jesus stood in front of that tomb, called Lazarus by name, and commanded him to come out. And immediately life returned to his body. Why? Because when God speaks, everything must respond. Death had no choice but to release him. The grave had no power to hold him. The moment Jesus declared life, the shift happened. That is how powerful God's Word is. When He declares something over your life, nothing can stand against it. No delay, no disappointment, no attack from the enemy can cancel what God has already planned. The problem is that many people give up too soon. They quit believing right before the shift happens. They lose faith when things get hard. But what if the breakthrough you've been waiting for is just around the corner? What if you are closer than you think? Look at the story of the Israelites at Jericho. God told them that the walls would fall, but He didn't tell them exactly how or when. He told them to march around the city for 6 days, and on the 7th day to march 7 times and then shout. Imagine how they must have felt. Walking in circles, seeing no change, hearing no sound of breaking. If they had stopped on the 6th day, they would have missed the miracle. But because they kept going, because they obeyed, even when they didn't see results, on the 7th day, when they shouted, the walls came down instantly. What does that mean for you? Your obedience, your faith, and your persistence are what position you for the shift. You may not see movement right now, but that doesn't mean God isn't working. You may feel like you're walking in circles, but the breakthrough could be just one more step away. The key is to keep believing, to keep trusting, and to stay positioned for what God is about to do. Another example is Paul and Silas in prison. They were locked up, beaten, and chained. In the natural, it looked like their situation was hopeless. But instead of complaining, instead of giving up, they did something powerful. They praised God. They worshiped in the middle of their struggle. And as they praised, suddenly the ground began to shake, the prison doors flew open, and their chains fell off. Do you see the pattern? When God shifts something, it happens suddenly. One moment, Paul and Silas were in chains. The next, they were free. One moment, the Israelites were staring at a wall. The next, they were stepping into victory. One moment, Lazarus was dead. The next, he was walking out of the grave. That is how quickly God can turn things around. One divine moment, one word from Him, one act of His power, and everything can change. It doesn't matter how long you've been struggling. It doesn't matter how many people have told you it's impossible. Doesn't even matter how far gone the situation seems. When God says shift, doors open, miracles happen, breakthroughs are broken, and chains are broken. But here's the key. You must be ready. Too many people miss their shift because they aren't expecting it. They let doubt, fear, and discouragement blind them to what God is doing. They assume that because things have been a certain way for so long, they will always be that way. But God is not limited by your past, your failures, or your circumstances. Think about the man at the pool of Bethesda. He had been lying there for 38 years, waiting for someone to help him into the water when it was stirred. But when Jesus came, He didn't tell the man to wait for the water. He didn't tell him to keep lying there. Jesus looked at him and said, "Get up, pick up your mat and walk. And in that moment, everything changed. The shift was immediate. What if that is what God is saying to you today? Get up, believe again, trust again, move forward. The shift is happening. The question is, will you be ready for it? So today, I want to encourage you, don't give up. Don't let fear keep you from stepping into what God has for you. Don't let delay make you think it's not coming. Because when God shifts something, it happens suddenly. The waiting season is not forever. The struggle is not permanent. What God has spoken over your life will come to pass. And when it does, it won't be small. It won't be ordinary. It will be something so big, so undeniable that everyone around you will know that it was God. The kind of shift that turns mourning into joy, that takes you from the back to the front, that moves you from waiting to walking in your purpose. God is about to shift everything in your life. The only question is, are you ready for it?